Sold. The call came just as I was taking my first sip of coffee, a moment of quiet shattered by the voice I dreaded most. 2.4 million, Vivian purred, her words dripping with smug satisfaction. Not bad for that old beach house, huh? Years of dust and decay, gone in a single transaction. Honestly, Claire, you should be thanking me. My grip tightened around my mug, the ceramic dangerously close to cracking. Eleanor's beach house, the soul of every childhood summer. The place where salt air mixed with Grandma's lavender-scented hugs. The last tangible piece of her, sold, without my knowledge, without my consent. A slow chill crawled down my spine as realization settled in. She stole it from me. You did what? My voice barely rose above a whisper. Oh, don't be dramatic, she scoffed. I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. You never use it. You're always too busy with your oh-so-important legal career in Boston. And as executor of Eleanor's estate, I had every right to make the call. I forced a steady breath, years of courtroom experience kicking in. Vivian, that house was left to both of us. You can't just… Actually, I can, she cut in, her tone smug. The paperwork is final. The new owners take possession next week. I'm thinking of using my share for a yacht. Marcus's always wanted one. Marcus. Of course. Her gold-digging husband had his hands in this. I could picture them now, sipping overpriced wine in their oversized mansion, celebrating as they stole my inheritance out from under me. This isn't legal, I said, my voice steely. I never signed anything. Vivian laughed, sharp and dismissive. Read it and weep, Claire. I hold all the power here. Maybe if you weren't so busy playing hotshot lawyer, you'd have seen this coming. Maybe if you bothered to show up for more than one estate meeting, you'd know that. But you were always too important for family matters, weren't you? The familiar guilt trip, Vivian's favorite weapon. After Eleanor died, she positioned herself as the devoted granddaughter while I drowned myself in work to cope with the loss. I should have seen this coming. I'll fight this, I warned. With what? Your fancy law degree? She mocked. Face it, Claire, you lost. I won. The money's already transferred. It's done. The call ended with a click, leaving me standing in my kitchen, shaking with rage. Memories crashed over me, Eleanor's laughter on the wraparound porch, the scent of her garden blooming by the sea, the secret reading nook she built just for me. The house wasn't just property, it was the last piece of her, and Vivian had sold it like it was nothing. My phone buzzed again, a text from Vivian. Be out by Friday. New owners plan to gut the place. Don't worry, I already took anything valuable. I stared at the message, something clicking in my mind. Personal items, the study, Eleanor's study, the one room she always kept locked, the one she made me promise to check after she was gone. I had been too buried in my caseload to do it, but now… My fingers trembled as I dialed the only person who might help, Alexander Carter, Eleanor's lawyer for over 30 years. He answered on the second ring. Claire, I've been expecting your call, he said. Vivian sold the beach house, I blurted. She says as executor… Ah, he interrupted. The sound of rustling papers came through the phone. Yes, I received the notice this morning. Tell me, have you gone through your grandmother's study yet? I froze. Number why? Because your grandmother left very specific instructions about that room, Alexander said carefully. Instructions Vivian doesn't know about. A flicker of hope. Can you meet me this afternoon? Perfect. And Claire, bring a small silver key on a chain, the one your grandmother gave you. I touched the delicate key at my neck, the one I had worn since her funeral. never knowing why she insisted I keep it. "How did you—" "All in good time," Alexander said. "Your grandmother played the long game, Claire. She knew this day would come. She knew exactly what Vivian would do." Careful woman. She knew her granddaughters well. Very well indeed. The 2-hour train ride to Newport felt like an eternity. I tried to focus on case files, but my mind kept drifting to Eleanor. She had been sharp as ever until the end, always thinking 5 steps ahead. Her voice echoed in my memory. "You have to anticipate, dear. Not just the next move, but the next 5. And always have a contingency plan." When I stepped onto the platform, Alexander was waiting. His sharp eyes studied me as I approached. "You look just like her," he said. "Eleanor would be proud." "Vivian wouldn't agree," I muttered. "She thinks I abandoned the family for my career." Alexander snorted. "Vivian sees what Vivian wants. Your grandmother understood ambition. She built her empire from nothing, after all. But we're not here to discuss Vivian's opinions. We're here to discuss your grandmother's foresight." In his office, behind closed doors, he got straight to the point. "Claire, that key you wear, have you ever tried using it?" I shook my head. "Eleanor said I'd know when the time was right." "That time is now," Alexander said. "Your grandmother came to me 2 years ago, worried about Vivian's entitlement and her flexible relationship with ethics. So she took precautions." "What kind of precautions?" He slid a thick file toward me. "The deed Vivian used to sell the property. It's not the final version. 2 weeks before she passed, your grandmother filed an amended deed, one with very specific conditions about sale and ownership, conditions Vivian unknowingly violated." My pulse pounded. "What happens now?" Alexander smiled. "That depends on what's in the safe. Your grandmother left explicit instructions that only you could open it, and only after Vivian tried to sell the house without your consent." The weight of Eleanor's planning settled over me. She knew. She always knew. Alexander checked his watch. "Vivian's at a charity luncheon. If you want to check that safe, now's the time." The drive to the beach house was muscle memory. The moment I stepped inside, the scent of old books and salt air wrapped around me. The study was untouched. Vivian had never cared for Eleanor's books or business papers. The key slid smoothly into the hidden safe behind her desk. Inside was a thick envelope. My name was written in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. The note on the front read, "For Claire, when Vivian shows her true colors. I'm sorry it came to this, my dear, but some lessons must be learned the hard way. All my love, Eleanor." Hands trembling, I opened the envelope. My breath caught as I read. With each page, the truth became clearer. By the time I reached the final document, I knew exactly why Alexander had been so certain. I grabbed my phone and dialed. "Did you find it?" Alexander asked. "Yes," I said, gripping the papers. "Call Vivian and her lawyer. Emergency meeting, your office, now." "And the consequences?" he asked. I thought of Vivian's smug voice, her casual betrayal. The house meant nothing to her, but Eleanor's lessons? Those always came with consequences. "Oh, yes," I said, a slow smile forming. It's time Vivian learned Eleanor's last lesson about thinking ahead. The afternoon sun slanted through Alexander Carter's office windows, stretching long shadows across the polished conference table. Spread before me were the documents from Eleanor's safe, each page a testament to her foresight, another safeguard against exactly what Vivian had tried to do. The door burst open. Vivian swept in like a storm wrapped in designer fabric, her Hermes bag hitting the table with an impatient thud. Marcus, ever her shadow, followed with his usual smirk, while her lawyer, a nervous-looking young man, barely out of law school, hurried to keep up. "This better be important, Claire," Vivian snapped. "I was in the middle of—" I slid the documents toward her. Vivian barely spared them a glance before rolling her eyes. "What's this supposed to be?" "Your mistake," I said coolly. "Or should I say, your fraud?" Her expression barely flickered, but Marcus shifted beside her. "You signed an invalid deed, Vivian," Alexander said smoothly, leaning back in his chair. "Your grandmother's final amendment superseded the one you used for the sale. It renders your transaction void. The property still belongs to the estate, and by the conditions of that amendment, the house is now solely Claire's." Vivian blinked, then laughed, short, sharp, forced. "This is a joke," she scoffed. "You can't be serious. The sale's already done. The money's in my account." "Your account is irrelevant," I said, barely containing my satisfaction. "The sale was illegal. The new owners will be notified. The money will be reversed. And as for you," I tapped another document, "you violated estate law. You'll be facing legal consequences for unauthorized transfer of assets." Vivian's face paled. "That's ridiculous. I'm the executor." "Not anymore," Alexander interrupted. "Per your grandmother's stipulations, the moment you breached the deed's conditions, your executor privileges were revoked. The estate now falls under independent legal administration." Marcus cleared his throat. I think we should consult another lawyer." "Go ahead," I said. "But the law is the law." Claire rose, her voice carrying across the room. "You stole from me, Vivian. You stole from Eleanor. And now, everyone will know exactly what kind of person you are." The murmurs in the crowd intensified. Eyes turned. Vivian paled. "Now, you're paying the price." Vivian's hands trembled as she reached for the documents, scanning them frantically. This can't be right," she whispered. I stood, smoothing my blazer. "Oh, but it is," I said. "You always underestimated Eleanor, but she was always 5 steps ahead. And this time, Vivian, so was I." In the middle of planning the yacht club summer gala. "Oh, it's important," I said evenly. "You might want to sit down." "I'll stand," she shot back, folding her arms. "Just say whatever dramatic thing you need to say so I can get back to my life." Alexander cleared his throat. "Vivian, I really think you should sit down." Something in his tone made her hesitate. After a beat, she sank into a chair, Marcus hovering behind her like a bodyguard. I slid a document across the table. "Let's talk about the beach house sale you just executed." Vivian exhaled sharply. "We've been through this. As executor." "As executive," I cut in. "You had a duty to follow Eleanor's wishes to the letter. All of them." Her lawyer adjusted his tie, already flustered. "All relevant documents were reviewed and—" "No," Alexander said sharply. "Not all of them. Eleanor Whitmore filed an amended deed 2 weeks before her death. A deed with very specific conditions." Vivian stiffened. "What conditions?" I held up the document, its official seal glinting in the light. "The beach house could only be sold with unanimous agreement from both heirs, you and me. Any unauthorized sale would trigger what Eleanor called the character clause." "The what?" Marcus's hand tightened on Vivian's shoulder. "In the event that one granddaughter attempted to sell without the other's consent," Alexander explained, flipping open his copy of the deed, "ownership would immediately and irrevocably transfer to the wronged party." Vivian's manicured nails dug into the table. "That's impossible. I had the deed. I had authority." "You had a preliminary deed," I corrected. "Eleanor filed this amendment because she knew you too well." Vivian's gaze snapped to her lawyer. "She can't do that, can she?" The young man scanned the document, his expression shifting from concern to outright panic. It appears to be legally binding. Vivian's composure cracked. But I already sold it. The money's been transferred. The papers are signed. Alexander placed another document before her. The sale is void. The amended deed takes precedence. The moment you attempted the unauthorized sale, the beach house became Claire's. Silence swallowed the room. Vivian had gone pale. "No," she whispered. "No, this isn't happening." "Oh, it gets worse," I said, sliding forward the final document from the safe. "Eleanor didn't just plan for the beach house. She planned for everything." Vivian's eyes darted across the page. Marcus read over her shoulder, his smirk finally gone. "The execution of the estate," I continued, "was conditional. As executor, you were required to follow ethical guidelines. Trying to sell jointly owned property without consent, that's a breach." Alexander took over, his tone professional but firm. "Effective immediately, Vivian. You are removed as executor, but it doesn't stop there. The audit revealed embezzlement, fraud, and unauthorized transfers. You won't just lose the estate, you'll face legal consequences. That authority now belongs to Claire." Vivian shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. "You can't do this to me. I handled everything while she was off playing lawyer in Boston." "You tried to steal from me," I said evenly. "You ignored Eleanor's wishes and tried to sell our family home for a yacht." Marcus's voice was tight with anger. "What happens now?" I gathered the documents. "Now, Vivian hands over all executorship duties. The sale is undone. I'll handle reimbursing the buyers, and you'll both vacate Eleanor's estate house within 30 days. Vivian's strangled gasp made her lawyer flinch. "That's our home!" "No," I corrected. "It was part of the estate, one you no longer control." Marcus's protest was cut off by Alexander. "As executor, Vivian was allowed to reside there, but she's not executor anymore." Vivian collapsed back into her chair, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Not tears of remorse, tears of frustration, of losing. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would Eleanor do this to me?" I pulled out a final item from my briefcase, a letter sealed with Eleanor's wax insignia. "She left this for you, to be opened only if the character clause was triggered." Vivian's hands trembled as she broke the seal. I knew what it said. There had been a copy in the safe for me, too. "My dearest Vivian, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. You have chosen greed over family, entitlement over integrity, and for that, you have lost the very thing you sought to take. I did not raise you to scheme against your own blood, but if this is the path you've chosen, then you must face the consequences." Vivian's breath hitched as she read. "I built this family from nothing. I protected it, nurtured it, and secured its future. You were given a place in that future, just as Claire was. But a place comes with responsibility. You have shown that you cannot be trusted with that responsibility." Marcus shifted beside her, his expression unreadable. The house was never just wood and stone. It was a legacy you would have been part of had you honored your duty. Instead, you tried to steal from your own sister. You betrayed the trust given to you. And so, the house is no longer yours. Vivian's fingers curled around the paper, her knuckles white. "Maybe one day you'll understand. Maybe one day you'll regret what you've done. But today, Vivian, you reap what you sow." "All my love." Eleanor Vivian's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. The weight of Eleanor's final lesson settled over her like a crushing tide. And this time, there was no escape. Fears have been realized. You've allowed your desire for status and wealth to override your sense of right and wrong. You chose betrayal over trust. I love you, my darling girl, but love does not mean ignoring wrongdoing. This lesson may seem harsh, but it is one you need to learn. The beach house was never just a property. It was a symbol of family, of values. Claire understood that. You, however, saw only dollar signs. True wealth isn't measured in yachts or club memberships. It's measured in integrity and the strength of family bonds. Learn from this. It's not too late to be the person I know you can be. All my love. Eleanor Vivian crumpled the letter in her fist, tears spilling freely now. This isn't fair, she choked out. I was the good granddaughter. No, I said softly. You were the granddaughter who played the part. There's a difference. Her lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Henderson, given these developments, I strongly advise full cooperation. Vivian ignored him, turning to Alexander instead. You knew the whole time and let me go through with the sale anyway? Alexander met her gaze. Your grandmother wanted you to learn, and some lessons can only be taught through consequences. Marcus scoffed. This is theft. We'll fight it. Feel free, Alexander said mildly. But be aware, any legal challenge will trigger a full audit of the estate's finances, including certain questionable withdrawals. Vivian's face went bloodless. Marcus's hand dropped from her shoulder. You have until the end of the month to vacate, I said, standing, and all estate accounts must be transferred to me by the end of the week. Vivian's voice was barely above a whisper. You'll just take everything? No. I gathered my things. I'll manage the estate fairly, but you lost the right to be in charge. She didn't respond, just grabbed her bag and stormed out. Marcus followed, leaving their lawyer behind, looking defeated. I'll send the files over tomorrow, he muttered. And I'm sorry, I should have done more due diligence. After they left, Alexander poured 2 glasses of scotch, Eleanor's favorite. You handled that well, he said. Eleanor would be proud. I took the glass, suddenly exhausted. She knew, didn't she? I murmured. She knew exactly how this would play out. Alexander nodded. She was an exceptional judge of character. I exhaled, thinking of the beach house, the overgrown gardens, the memories waiting to be restored. First, I'll fix the beach house, I said. Then, if Vivian lets me, I'll try to fix us. And if she won't, then I'll honor Eleanor's wishes anyway. That evening, I parked outside the beach house, watching the sun paint the ocean in gold and pink, the kind of sunset Eleanor used to love. My phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. I hope you're happy. You've ruined everything. I looked at the house, at the future waiting to unfold. No, Vivian, I whispered. I haven't ruined anything. I saved it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind as I sorted through years of estate documents in Eleanor's main house. The full extent of Vivian's mismanagement became painfully clear. Estate funds had paid for everything from spa retreats to designer shopping sprees, all neatly disguised as property maintenance or administrative expenses. One evening, I sat at Eleanor's antique desk, surrounded by bank statements and receipts, when Alexander called. Vivian's lawyer reached out, he said without preamble. She's demanding a formal audit of the estate. I let out a laugh. Does she not realize an audit will expose all her unauthorized spending? I have a feeling Marcus is behind this, Alexander mused. He's been complaining about unfair treatment at the country club. Claims you've mounted some kind of conspiracy against them. Of course he has, I muttered, rubbing my temples, a headache brewing. How do we handle this? Let them proceed, Alexander said, amusement creeping into his voice. Your grandmother kept meticulous records. Every legitimate expense documented, every asset accounted for. Vivian's creative accounting won't survive scrutiny. Just then, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside. Through the window, I saw a familiar black SUV, Vivian's. I stood as she stormed inside, her eyes blazing. "You set me up!" she hissed. I crossed my arms. "You set yourself up, Vivian." She threw a stack of papers onto the desk. "You think you've won? You think you can just erase me from the family?" I sighed. "You're not erased. You just don't get to cheat your way through life anymore." Her jaw clenched. "You always thought you were better than me." I shook my head. "No, Vivian. I just knew that Eleanor's love wasn't something you could buy." For a moment, something flickered in her expression, something almost like regret. But just as quickly, she buried it. She grabbed her keys and turned toward the door. I let her go. Not because I didn't care, not because I didn't want to fix things, but because some lessons can't be taught. They have to be earned. Tires crunched on gravel. Through the study window, I saw Vivian's white Mercedes pull up the circular drive. "I'll call you back," I told Alexander. "My sister's here." Vivian didn't wait for an invitation. She stormed through the front door like she still owned the place, her heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood. "We need to talk," she announced, appearing in the doorway. I gestured to the chair across from me. "I'm listening." She stayed standing, arms crossed. "This has gone far enough, Claire. You've made your point, but this is ridiculous. I'm family, not some employee you can just dismiss." "No one's dismissing you, Vivian, but actions have consequences. You tried to sell the beach house without my consent. You used estate funds for personal expenses." "I was the executor," she snapped. "I had every right to be compensated for my time." Compensation is one thing. Treating the estate like your personal ATM is another. I pulled out a stack of statements. Designer handbags, spa weekends, Marcus's golf club membership. "These aren't estate expenses, Vivian." She sank into the chair, her composure cracking. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to take responsibility, pay back what you took, accept that you're no longer in charge, and maybe, just maybe, we can salvage something here." "Pay it back?" She let out a bitter laugh. "With what money? Marcus's real estate business is struggling. The country club raised dues again, and now you're kicking us out of this house. We can barely afford our mortgage as it is." For the first time in years, I really looked at my sister. Behind the designer clothes and carefully painted-on confidence, I saw something else. Desperation. "What happened to you, Rach?" I asked softly. "When did keeping up appearances become more important than everything else?" Her lip trembled. "You don't understand. You left. You built your perfect little career in Boston, while I stayed here, trying to maintain our family's standing. Do you know how hard that is? How expensive?" "No one asked you to do that," I said. "Eleanor certainly didn't. She cared about family, about integrity, not social status. Easy for you to say. You never cared what people thought. Because Eleanor taught us it shouldn't matter." I exhaled, steadying myself. She threw a stack of papers onto the desk. "You think you've won? You think you can just erase me from the family?" I sighed. "You're not erased. You just don't get to cheat your way through life anymore." Her jaw clenched. "You always thought you were better than me." I shook my head. "No, Vivian. I just knew that Eleanor's love wasn't something you could buy." For a moment, something flickered in her expression, something almost like regret. But just as quickly, she buried it. She grabbed her keys and turned toward the door. I let her go, not because I didn't care, not because I didn't want to fix things, but because some lessons can't be taught. They have to be earned. Tires crunched on gravel. Through the study window, I saw Vivian's white Mercedes pull up the circular drive. "I'll call you back," I told Alexander. "My sister's here." Vivian didn't wait for an invitation. She stormed through the front door like she still owned the place, her heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood. "We need to talk," she announced, appearing in the doorway. I gestured to the chair across from me. "I'm listening." She stayed standing, arms crossed. "This has gone far enough, Claire. You've made your point, but this is ridiculous. I'm family, not some employee you can just dismiss." "No one's dismissing you, Vivian, but actions have consequences. You tried to sell the beach house without my consent. You used estate funds for personal expenses." "I was the executor," she snapped. "I had every right to be compensated for my time." Compensation is one thing. Treating the estate like your personal ATM is another. I pulled out a stack of statements: designer handbags, spa weekends, Marcus's golf club membership. "These aren't estate expenses, Vivian." She sank into the chair, her composure cracking. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to take responsibility, pay back what you took, accept that you're no longer in charge, and maybe, just maybe, we can salvage something here." "Pay it back?" She let out a bitter laugh. "With what money? Marcus's real estate business is struggling. The country club raised dues again, and now you're kicking us out of this house. We can barely afford our mortgage as it is." For the first time in years, I really looked at my sister. Behind the designer clothes and carefully painted-on confidence, I saw something else: desperation. "What happened to you, Rach?" I asked softly. "When did keeping up appearances become more important than everything else?" Her lip trembled. "You don't understand. You left. You built your perfect little career in Boston, while I stayed here trying to maintain our family's standing. Do you know how hard that is? How expensive?" "No one asked you to do that," I said. "Eleanor certainly didn't. She cared about family, about integrity, not social status." "Easy for you to say. You never cared what people thought. Because Eleanor taught us it shouldn't matter." I exhaled, steadying myself. "Look, I'll make you a deal. Pay back the estate funds you misused, help me restore the beach house instead of trying to sell it, and you can stay here until you and Marcus get back on your feet." She looked up sharply. "You'd do that? After everything? You're still my sister. And I think this is what Eleanor would have wanted, giving you a chance to make things right." Vivian was quiet for a long moment, staring at Eleanor's portrait above the fireplace. Finally, she sighed. "The beach house needs a new roof, and the garden's a mess." "I know, but we can fix it together if you want." She hesitated, then reached into her designer bag and pulled out a folder. "These are estimates I got before I tried to sell it, for repairs and renovations. I thought they'd help with the sale price, but maybe." I took the folder, recognizing it for what it was: an olive branch. "Thank you," I said. "This is a good start." She smoothed her skirt with shaking hands. "I'll talk to Marcus about the money. It might take some time." "We can work out a payment plan," I assured her. "That's what family does." At the doorway, she paused. "Claire, I'm sorry. Not just about the beach house, about everything. I got lost somewhere along the way." "I know, Rach, but we can find your way back. Eleanor believed in second chances, remember?" After she left, I called Alexander to update him. "A payment plan?" he asked skeptically. "Are you sure about this?" "No," I admitted, "but I have to try, for Eleanor's sake, if nothing else." Well, your grandmother did believe in redemption, he mused, almost as much as she believed in consequences. Just be careful, Claire. People don't change overnight. I know. I'm not letting go of the reins. But maybe, just maybe, this can lead to something better. The next morning, I drove to the beach. The house sat waiting, framed by tangled vines and weathered shutters. A little worse for wear, but still standing. I parked, stepping out into the salty air. This place had history, heart. I wasn't just saving a house, I was saving a legacy. And maybe, just maybe, I was saving a family too. I arrived at the house early. To my surprise, Vivian's car was already there. She was in the garden, wearing jeans and work gloves, pulling weeds. She looked up as I approached. "The roses," she said, pointing to a tangled mass of branches. "Eleanor's prize roses. They're still alive under there, just needed some care." I knelt beside her, slipping on my own gloves. "Show me what to do." As we worked side by side in the morning sun, I thought about Eleanor's letter, about lessons learned the hard way. Maybe this was part of her plan too. Not just consequences, but the chance for reconciliation. Vivian hesitated. "Claire, there's something else I need to tell you, about some other estate matters." Vivian's revelation sent us down yet another rabbit hole of financial complications. She sat in the garden, dirt still on her gloves, her voice barely above a whisper as she confessed. "I invested some of the estate money," she admitted, staring at the ground. "Marcus." "Of course he did." I closed my eyes, already dreading what was coming. "How much?" "800,000, she whispered. "From Eleanor's investment accounts." The amount hit me like a physical blow. "Tell me you didn't put estate funds into one of Marcus's real estate schemes." Her silence was answer enough. I thought of Eleanor, how carefully she had built her fortune, how meticulously she had planned for our future. Now, her hard work was tied up in whatever questionable venture Marcus had concocted. "What exactly did he invest in?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "A development project in Florida," she said. "He said it was guaranteed returns, but—" She twisted her gloves in her hands. "The developer filed for bankruptcy last month." And there it was. The real reason for their desperate attempt to sell the beach house, for Marcus's aggressive response to the audit threat. They weren't just living beyond their means. They were trying to cover up a massive financial disaster. I pulled out my phone to call Alexander, but Vivian grabbed my arm. "Please," she begged, "don't call him yet. Marcus doesn't know I'm telling you this. He thinks we can still fix it." "Fix it, Vivian?" "This is embezzlement. You took protected estate funds and lost them in a bad investment. There's no fixin' that." "I know!" She burst into tears. Real ones this time, not her usual calculated display. "I know I messed up. Everything's falling apart, and I don't know what to do." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Behind the designer facade and society manners, she was terrified. For the first time, I saw what Eleanor must have seen. A woman so desperate to prove her worth that she had lost sight of what actually mattered. "First," I said, standing up, "we need to understand exactly what happened. Get your keys. We're going to see Marcus." The drive to their Providence house was tense. Vivian kept starting to speak, then stopping herself. When we pulled up to their colonial-style home, Marcus's car was in the driveway. "Let me do the talking," I said as we approached the door. Marcus's face, when he opened it, said everything. "Vivian!" he hissed. "What did you do?" "What she should have done months ago," I replied, pushing past him into their immaculate foyer. "Start talking, Marcus. Everything about this Florida development." What emerged over the next 2 hours was a tale of increasingly desperate financial moves. Marcus had leveraged their house to invest in the development, convinced it would solve all their money problems. When that started to go south, he pressured Vivian to use estate funds to cover their mounting debts. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he insisted, pacing their living room. "The developer had a solid track record." "Had," I noted, reviewing the documents he reluctantly provided. "Did you do any actual due diligence before investing?" His silence was damning. I turned to Vivian, who sat small and quiet on their expensive couch. "This is why you tried to sell the beach house, isn't it?" I asked. "To cover this mess before anyone found out." Vivian wiped at her tear-streaked face, nodding. Marcus groaned, rubbing his temples. "It's not that bad. We just need to—" "No," I snapped. "You need to stop lying to yourself. The money is gone, Marcus. There's no fixing this." Vivian exhaled shakily. "What do we do now?" I clenched my jaw. "First, we call Alexander," I said. "Then we start working out a legal repayment plan, before the state gets involved." Marcus scoffed. "And if I refuse?" I met his gaze, my voice cold. "Then you'll be dealing with more than just me. You'll be dealing with the law." He didn't speak again. Vivian sat there, shoulders slumped, staring at nothing. "You should go," she murmured. "I need to talk to Marcus." I nodded. Outside, I finally exhaled, the weight of everything pressing down on me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. I climbed into my car, the sun dipping low over the horizon. The beach house still needed work. The estate still needed repairs. But one thing was clear. I wasn't just fixing a house. I was fixing a family. Or at least, I was trying. Vivian nodded miserably. The developer was demanding more capital. Marcus said if we couldn't provide it, we'd lose everything we'd already invested. I panicked. I thought of Eleanor's words about thinking 5 moves ahead. She must have seen this coming. Vivian's susceptibility to Marcus's schemes, his financial recklessness, the inevitable crash. My phone buzzed. Alexander again. This time, I answered. "Claire," he said urgently, "we need to talk about the Florida situation." I sat up straighter. "How did you—" "Your grandmother," he interrupted, left very specific instructions about unauthorized investments, including a separate insurance policy designed to protect against exactly this type of situation. Hope flickered faintly. "What kind of insurance policy?" "A rather substantial one," he said. She knew Vivian might be tempted to invest estate funds unwisely. The policy covers losses up to $1 million, specifically in cases of unauthorized investment or misappropriation. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by another example of Eleanor's foresight. "Can you come to Marcus and Vivian's house? We need to handle this now." An hour later, we all sat around their dining room table. Me, Vivian, Marcus, and Alexander, who had brought a thick folder of documents. "The insurance claim will cover the lost investment," Alexander explained. "But there are conditions." "Of course there are," Marcus muttered. Alexander ignored him. "First, both Vivian and Marcus must sign agreements acknowledging their responsibility for the unauthorized investment. Second, they'll need to attend financial management counseling. The estate will cover this cost. Third," he looked directly at Marcus, "you will need to step down from any involvement with estate matters, formally and permanently." "And if we refuse?" Marcus challenged. "Then," Alexander said, his voice even, "Claire will have no choice but to pursue legal action for the recovery of misappropriated funds. Given the documentation we have, that would likely result in criminal charges." The room fell silent. Vivian reached for Marcus's hand, but he pulled away, standing up abruptly. "I need some air," he announced, then walked out the front door. Vivian watched him go, then turned to me, tears in her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now," I said gently, "we do what Eleanor would want. We fix what's broken, not just the beach house, but our family too. But Vivian, this only works if you're truly ready to change." She nodded slowly. "The counseling, will you come with me? Not because you have to, but because we're sisters," I finished. "Yes, I'll come." Over the next few months, a new pattern emerged. Vivian and I spent weekends at the beach house, slowly bringing it back to life. She threw herself into the restoration with surprising enthusiasm, particularly the garden. Sometimes I caught glimpses of the sister I remembered from childhood, before status and appearances became her whole world. Marcus filed for divorce in the fall. Vivian was devastated, but not surprised. "He never loved me," she confided one evening as we sat on the newly repaired porch. "He loved what I represented: access to Eleanor's money, social connections. When that fell apart—" "His loss," I said firmly. "You're worth more than that." The insurance claim protected the estate, and Vivian stuck with her counseling. She even started working part-time at a local garden center, discovering a real talent for landscape design. 1 year later, we held a small ceremony in the restored garden, dedicating a bench in Eleanor's honor. As Vivian spoke, her voice steady and clear, I knew Eleanor would be proud, not just of the beach house, but of the family she'd left behind, finally finding their way back to what truly mattered.